So you got 2 people online today.
All right, good morning, Adrienne and Rachel. It's Friday. Everyone's tired. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so the paragraph I really want us to look at starting here is, well, I don't know that we did paragraph 32, so let's just back up to that one quickly. Ed was in there, but I'm not sure. Okay. Okay, yeah, I haven't seen him. Okay. This contract may not be assigned without the written consent of buyer and seller. If buyer and seller agree in writing to an assignment of this contract, the original parties to this contract remain obligated hereunder until settlement. So what that means, an assignability is maybe an investor is going to purchase a home and they're doing it quickly and everything is in their personal name, but they want to create an LLC or some other entity or bring partners in. So when they fill out the offer, they may put, for example, Deborah A. Ruef or assigns. I might say that right up front that I might assign it, or maybe later on I will have the time, talk to my accountant and say, yes, I should go ahead and create an LLC for this, choose the name, get all that paperwork set up, and then create an addendum, an amendment to change the purchaser's name to the new entity. However, what this paragraph 32 is saying is that I am, as the original offerer, still on the hook to make sure that this contract goes to settlement in full. Little noise from the hallway there. So assignabilities happen often in investments. It could be that one party is coming into town and it's impossible for maybe the spouse to be part of the deal, even electronically now. So it's very possible that one side might be Bill Smythe or assigns, and eventually it might be Bill Mary, and maybe they're going to put it into a trust. So there's all different things that could cause it to be assigned, okay? But again, it's an agreement between all parties that it is going to be assigned, okay? So now definitions. The first and foremost is the date of ratification and how that happens. So I'm going to use this piece of paper for an example. First, we'll read the definition, and then I want you really to pay attention to what I'm doing here. So the date of ratifications means the date of delivery of the final acceptance in writing by buyer and seller of all the terms of this contract to buyer and seller, not the date of the expiration or removal of any contingencies. So my left hand will be the buyer and my right hand is the seller, okay? So a buyer makes an offer to a seller, okay? A seller accepts it as is or makes changes. So let's say they change a few of the terms. And that's the contract, all the contingencies, and in the addenda that incorporates, if you remember in our language beforehand, you have this agreement, okay, but then there's addenda and contingencies that are added to it to make the whole. So it's not just this page of 16 sheets of paper. It could simply be that if it was a cash deal and no other things involved, but there's usually at least one more piece of paper, which is the residential disclosure. So anyway, so buyer offers to seller, seller makes changes, sends it back to the buyer, so it's a counter offer. Buyer can accept or not. So if buyer counters back, they make changes, they send it back to the seller. The seller now has added their initials and agreed to everything from the buyer's counter. Is this ratified? No, everything's been signed, everything's been initialed.
No, because that's been delivered back to the buyer.
Correct. Thank you, Dennis. So everything is initialed and everything is signed. Now, the listing agent is not the one who puts the ratification date on because it is not ratified until it's delivered back. At this point, it is considered ratified, and the buyer's agent in this particular scenario adds the ratification date, sends it back to the listing agent, who disperses it to their seller. Okay. At the same time and simultaneously, the buyer's agent is also holding their ratified copy, at which time they disperse it to their buyer, the title company that's listed in the contract, and the lender for the buyer, and anyone else that is deemed needs to have a copy. Okay. And then as agents, you both are obligated to upload it to your broker, however they require you to do so. In our case, it is through .loop. Okay. Whether you're using .loop or not, whether this is a handwritten copy or an electronic copy, it still has to be uploaded into .loop. That is your file cabinet in the sky in your submission portal. Okay. All right. So what most often happens, and which is incorrect, is that the seller did the last initials and signature, and then that listing agent put the ratification date on there and sent it over. Okay. And that's not correct. And where that could come into an issue is if that listing agent did this at 10 o'clock last night, February 1st, then it affects the contingency dates of the buyer. Because the contingencies start the day following, you start counting the next day. So if I had a 7-day contingency for home inspection, and last night at 10 o'clock, this listing agent sent me this ratified notice to me, it's before February 2nd. So basically they're telling me that February 2nd is my day one. And then I run for 7 days. So 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. February 8th at 9 p.m. is the end of my contingency. That's my expiration date. But that's not correct because the listing agent is not the one to do that. So if you're ever in a situation where you have the other side did the last initials and signature and that agent ratified it. Now, if it's in the same day of ratification, I mean, you received it midday and it's not going to change, you know, you can cross it out and redo it, but you can accept it. But if it's ever late at night or something like that, change it and remind them of what it says here about delivery. A good majority of the agents do not understand the delivery process. And I'm sure Steve and David can tell you, and Sheila, that sometimes the conflicts that we have between agents is over delivery and just not knowing the basic language of what it says. So just remember your delivery. You guys are fresh out of school, and it talked about delivery, but it seems to get forgotten a lot, okay? All right, appraisal means a written appraised valuation of the property. Excuse me. We are not allowed to choose our appraisers. There was a time that your lender knew a bank full of appraisers and could choose them. But because of the way the world went in the 2000s, that was taken away. So the appraisers are ordered through the bank, but they're from a pool of appraisers, okay? It does not mean that they know everything. And if you are kind to them and polite, you might have the same attitude back. So if you're a listing agent, sorry, excuse me. An appraiser calls and says they've been called in to appraise your client's home. Be polite and say, I don't want to offend you in any way, but are you familiar with, like if you have a special pocketed area that's different, like in our area, like I said, right here, within a half mile to a mile of where we are, there's so many different neighborhoods that mean different things. So if appraisers coming from Pennsylvania, and like I've used Great Falls as an example, and they're not familiar with Great Falls Street and how one side could be McLean, one side's Falls Church, one part of it is yet the City Falls Church. So it's significant to what the appraised value is for that area. So when I sold my house in Pemmon Hills back in April, and the appraiser called me, that was the exact thing. He was from Pennsylvania. And I said, I just want to double check. I don't want to offend you, but are you familiar with Pemmon Hills? Have you heard of that area and how it is a little bit different when you go into it? He says, I've done one other appraisal there, but I'm willing to see anything you want to show me and share with me. And some of them get their backup if you get your backup. So it's better to approach them from a politeness and try to, because sometimes as listing agents, we may know information on the ground in that particular neighborhood or on that particular street that could significantly change the value of the house. I know, for example, that the house I sold, when I bought it, the appraiser back then, the bank could choose who it was, and he came in. And then when I refinanced a year later, he said, Deb, I had to reduce the amount by $20,000 because you're refinancing and you live in front of the school. So for him, living in front of what then was the adult education center devalued my house by $20,000. He didn't do it on the sale because he knew at that time in 2003 the market was soaring, but on the refinance, he erred on the side of caution. So, things like that can make a difference. If you had a house that you were comping on a street that was in front of the school and yours was around the corner, maybe yours did have a value of $20,000 more, because of that. So just know that you can work with the appraisers, but be kind and ask them if you can assist or provide any information, okay? Okay, days means calendar days unless otherwise specified in the contract. So 7 days a week, 6, 7, right? Because Sunday's a day. It's 7 straight days. It's not 6 days. It's not 5 days. It's straight days. Now, if you specify in the contract business days, what are your business days? Really? Banks are open on Saturday. So it's up to interpretation is what I'm trying to say. So if you are going to be an agent who wants to specify business days, then you need to clarify that your business days are Monday through Friday. Okay? Now, instead of saying 7 business days, it's much better to say 10 days. It's pretty much the same, plus 1 if there's a holiday. So instead of using the word business and then having to clarify that the business in your mind is Monday through Friday, then just use straight days, but add a couple. Again, those are negotiable. As a buyer making an offer, you can say, I want my contingency to be 10 business days or 10 days or 7 days or whatever, and the other side could say, no, we think 10 days is too long. Or back and forth. So again, it's all negotiable. You can ask as a buyer, and the seller can contradict or not. Okay, but remember, they are straight days. All references to time of day shall refer to the time of day at Eastern Standard Time of the United States. And why do you think that is? Because that's where we are. Okay. For the purpose of computing time periods, the first day will be the day following delivery, and the time will end at 9 p.m. on the day specified. If the settlement date falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, then the settlement will be on the prior business day. Oh, thank you, Dennis. Sorry, online. Dennis is keeping an eye out for you. Okay, so paragraph E. It's the prior business day. This is another one of those things that people get wrong a lot. They don't look at their calendar when they're making an offer. Now, back in the day when we didn't have smartphones with our calendars on it, and you didn't have your wall calendar handy or your day timer, I could see making a mistake thinking that Saturday, that Friday was the 3rd, when Saturday is the 3rd of February. But my gosh, nowadays with your phones, there shouldn't be these errors. You should be able to look. You should be looking at a calendar when you're putting together this offer as a buyer's agent for sure, and as a listing agent when you're receiving it. You should be working with your buyer, what day works for you. So someone might be off on a Wednesday. So for them, a closing on a Wednesday is a preferred day. Or a lot of government workers have Mondays or Fridays off every other week. So that might be how they would choose to schedule their closing, not to have to take an extra day off of work. So you're looking at the calendar. But should someone mistakenly put a weekend or, worst case, a federal holiday, they don't realize that Monday, January 15th was Martin Luther King Day, and they forgot about it, and they put that day as a settlement day, and no one caught it right away, and no one made a change. It doesn't mean they settle on Friday. It doesn't mean they settle on Tuesday. They have to settle on Friday. Now, the lender may not be ready, but that's what this says here in paragraph E. So you would have to have an amendment to postpone settlement a day or two. It doesn't automatically roll forward the day. So if the buyer thinks, oh, we'll just do it on the 16th of January, the seller can take exception to that, okay? An amendment has to be put forth requesting that change. I'll say for delivery, you want to see that we'll go back over and look at the delivery paragraph. And I believe David talked to you guys about this on Monday for those that were online and here. When you're making an offer as a buyer's agent working with your buyer, on the delivery paragraph, which is in your book on, because this is important, I don't want you guys to miss this, page 94, which is page 3 of the actual contract, paragraph 6. When making an offer for subparagraph A, unless indicated online by the listing agent, you should check the word email and then put in the listing agent's email. And then under subparagraph B, however you and your client choose to receive delivery documents, it can be simply you or you and your client, okay? Some agents are concerned about sharing their client's email with the other side so that, the other side just can't reach out to their client. It's perfectly acceptable to put your client's email there to receive communication as in documents from the other agent simultaneously to you as the buyer's agent receiving them. What is not acceptable is that the listing agent or a cooperating agent would send an email to your client asking any questions of anything or asking for information. But on paragraph A, if there's nothing there and it's left blank in the terms of the offer, and it goes over to the seller side, and the listing agent does not catch the fact that it's blank, and everything is ratified and it's blank, David told you guys this, delivery is at the physical address of the home. And no one wants to be going out there at a home late at night or whatever to deliver something. An addendum, a piece of paper, anything. And if you send it in email, it's not according to the contract. And if there's an issue, that's something they can hang their hat on, okay? So just be careful about that. All right, so page. Okay, for specified financing, see price and specified financing paragraph. So on page 1, we've told what the financing is going to be, but unless it's cash, we're backing it up with a document, a contingency specifying in more detail what it means to have that financing, okay? The masculine includes the feminine, and the singular includes the plural. So it's he, she, instead of having he and she, or the his and hers, it's just, buyer, seller. It can be buyers, sellers, male, female, it does not matter. For possession date, see the possession date paragraph. And we discussed that yesterday. It's the day that possession is taken of the home by the buyer. Okay. Legal expenses means attorney fees, court costs, and litigation expenses, if any, including but not limited to expert witness fees, and court reporter fees. So in the clause about, a legal dispute, and if there is a prevailing party, the loser pays, and this details some of the things that they pay. Okay, notices. Notice, or notify means a unilateral communication from one party to another. All notices required under this contract will be in writing and will be effective as of delivery. Written acknowledgement of receipt of notice is a courtesy but not required. So, I think David, we brought up on Monday during our conversation that in Virginia, no one can take the right of the buyer to choose their title company. But you might be working with your buyer to purchase a property, and the listing agent is kind of strong-arming you to use a particular title company. They could say something along the line, well, we have multiple contracts, and people are writing in our preferred title company. So it's set in such a way that, you would be in better running your client if you would play our game and use our preferred title company. So as a buyer's agent, you can play that game. And now if you trust that title company, they have a good reputation, then there's no reason not to use them. But there could be very good reason that you just know from the scuttlebutt around that it's not a great situation. And so therefore, once you've ratified, so if your contract ratifies, and even though the contract says XYZ title company, and your buyer said, do you really trust them, Dennis? And Dennis goes, I don't know them. And I do know ABC title company, and I know if anything goes wrong, they're going to let us know. So I would feel comfortable if you do using ABC instead of XYZ. So then you, the buyer's agent, prepares a one-way notice that your buyer signs, and all you do is send it to the other side. The other side does not have to sign it, nor do they have to acknowledge that they've received it. It's a unilateral, it's a courtesy like it says, but it's not required. You've sent it to them, and that's it. You've also sent it to the title company. If there's title companies involved, you send it to both title companies. You let everyone know that your buyer, per state of Virginia law, has changed their mind on who they want to use for their title company. Another notice is if you want to void based on HOA documents. Again, the state of Virginia says they have 3 days to review the documents. So today, I, as a listing agent, send to Dennis, the buyer's agent, HOA documents. Time is of the essence. Dennis must send those to his client immediately. Again, that's another reason to have in the contract you and your client both being recipients of those. So there's no shenanigans as to how long it's going to take you to get those to your client. Okay?
When does the clock start on HOA documents? If you receive them on Monday, when does the clock start?
Tuesday. So the day you receive them, it's the next day. So you receive them at 11:59 p.m., it's at midnight. Okay, so the next day. Now it's reasonable, but if you receive documents at 11:59 p.m. to you as an agent, you're not expected to get them to your client immediately for the clock to start on Tuesday. It's time is of the essence, and it's a reasonable request. But certainly by the next day, you should make sure your client has them in their hand and has signed the acknowledgement receiving those documents. Then your client has 3 days to review the documents. And if they are not going to get out on it and they have no questions, except perhaps about the violations, and then you write that up, then that just passes. Nothing has to be done. But if your client does not want to go forward based on HOA or condo docs, all you do is there's a notice for that. It's a unilateral notice that they sign and just says we're voiding the contract based on HOA and condo docs, and no further explanation is required, and nor should another agent demand an explanation. They may want one, but you are not obligated as an agent to tell them, and nor are your clients, and they cannot and should not browbeat you over this. Unfortunately, I was just in an email chain about a week and a half ago of the very same thing. And it was very unprofessional what the other side was doing. And it saddens me that we deal with that on a constant basis. But anyway, I digress. Buyer and purchaser may be used interchangeably in this contract and any accompanying addenda or notices. So you hear us say buyer, purchaser, buyer, seller, lister. So those are interchangeable all the time. Good morning, Mohammed. We're on page 105, paragraph 34. All right, miscellaneous. This contract may be signed in one or more counterparts, each of which is deemed to be an original, and all of which together constitutes one and the same instrument. Documents obtained via facsimile machines will also be considered as originals. Typewritten or handwritten provisions included in this contract will control all pre-printed provisions that are in conflict. Okay, typewritten or handwritten provisions included in this contract will control all pre-printed provisions that are in conflict. So if there's any changes with what's here, strike throughs. So you might strike through a paragraph for some reason. Well, like if there's no HOA and condo documents, someone might strike through that whole paragraph for readability for their clients. Just say up front, look, there's nothing there. Okay, so that really overrides the contract. And generally speaking, when you're making that offer and that's part of it struck through, you don't need to initial there, but other banks and stuff require sometimes that it be initial, so it doesn't hurt to have someone initial when you've struck through a paragraph for some reason. Like if there's no second mortgage, there's no assumption, it's very customary to see those paragraphs struck through. Go and have your client initial them, just because some of the banks require that they be struck through. If there's a strike through, there's initial matching it. So what this means, and in days of old, when we had a lot of faxing going on, so you had a fax, you started off with a piece of paper that was 8.5 by 11. And unfortunately, back then, some of those were 8.5 by 14. You go into a fax machine, and if the other side only had a reciprocal fax of 8.5 by 11, it shrunk it down to fit that fax. So then someone had to print that off of the fax paper. When it was that onion skin stuff, you'd make a copy of it. And if you weren't thoughtful enough to enlarge it again, then you took it to your client to sign. Then you faxed it back to the other side, and again, it would shrink down. At times, it would be almost unreadable. So whereas you could go back and forth, but you'd have part of the contract with the buyer's signature and part with the seller's signature. Once you merged those pages together, it was a complete contract, but they weren't all on the same document. So you may have 2-page ones, buyer and seller, 2-page 2. That is still considered part and parcel to the whole contract. It's a messy thing, but this paragraph covers that. It is considered a ratified and full contract. Okay. All right, home warranty. Ron was here yesterday. I'm going to give you a number, and then I'll tell you in a few minutes the purpose of this number. It is, I'll tell you what I'm looking up. It is our office's HMS warranty number. Okay. So if you guys want to write this number down, it's 142-082-962. I'll repeat it. It's 142-082-962. That is our office's HMS warranty number. So this occurred to me years ago when we were at the other brokerage. They're always encouraging us to sell warranties, and in fact, the agents had a document that their client had to say they declined the warranty. So they were really pushing the agents to do it, whether the warranty was good or not. It was just one of those somewhat mandated things. And at that time frame, for every warranty that was sold, the corporation, the big company out in New Jersey, they got X amount of dollars, which they shared in a budget item line for each office. But it was not a, in essence, it was a tit for tat, because if you sold the warranty, the office got so much credited to their line, not for the individual agents, but for the office, okay? So I thought if our agents are going to sell these warranties, and we're going to get the other side to help pay for those warranties, like as a buyer's agent, I'm going to say to the seller, you know, here in my contract, we would like the seller to buy an HMS warranty from my client. I said, well, why don't we start putting our office number down there? So not only do we say HMS warranty, we say HMS warranty and then the office number. In this case, the one I just gave you. So the seller agrees to it. So when it comes time to order the warranty, it is the buyer's agent who orders it under their office code, and it's that office who gets the credit in the big scheme of things. And, you know, it helps the office grow. Well, now here we are in this situation, and our office, because of our relationship with Ron, who spoke yesterday, we are one of the top offices for HMS, and that's why Ron does go above and beyond fighting our battles for us when there are issues. And there are always issues. Like you said, you're dealing with humans. You're dealing with varying people. But I use this all the time, and I put our number in here. And it's interesting. In my own contracts and in working with other agents too, is that oftentimes the listing agents have no clue what that means. So they kind of get their nose out of joint when they realize that the contract says it's going to be ordered under that number, and they can't order it under their office number and get the kudos from their office. So it's one of those little sneak attacks. So for me, it's like, okay, as a listing agent, you pay attention to that. You know, so if I was a listing agent and someone gave me an offer of a contract and it said home warranty paid by my seller, but it was other than an HMS, another company, I would more than likely strike through that, change it to HMS. Now, as a buyer, you really probably don't care who's going to, if you're getting a home warranty, you feel great, you know, and just let it go. But it's just one of those little things I like to do. I also put in there $588 because I put in there the basic plan plus the premier package. And as we learned yesterday, if you have a home that has the older HVACs and heating, to protect your client in case the system does go out, you need that premier package for that bridge between the new SEER systems and not. Again, I had a situation where on the day of settlement, the listing agent is complaining to the title company that they have the wrong amount, that an HMS warranty is only $499. And the title company is politely telling them the contract says $588. And they're having a fit. And, you know, we sent them the invoice and they said, well, we didn't agree to pay for any premier package. And we're like, you actually did, because it says $588. So therefore, that is the amount that you pay for. Sometimes I'll add a $50 reduction on there. So if you pay $100, if you pay an extra $100, $688, then your client's deductible is only $50. So sometimes I'll put that on there to see if they'll pay for it. And if they do, great. If not, it's negotiable, you know. But it just tells me how many things that people do not pay attention to. As a paralegal, you understand, you know, people gloss over things, okay? Time is of the essence, okay? Time is of the essence means that the dates and time frames agreed to by the parties must be met. Failure to meet stated dates or time frames will result in waiver and contractual rights or will be default under the contract. Okay. If this contract is contingent on financing and the contingency has not been removed or satisfied, any delay of the settlement date necessary to comply with buyer's lender's obligations pursuant to the res patilla integrated disclosure rule is not a default by buyer. But Seller may declare the contract void in writing. Nothing herein shall prohibit the parties from mutually agreeing in writing to extend settlement date under terms acceptable by both parties. So when it comes to the financing, we will talk about that when we get to the financing contingency and why this paragraph is the way it is. Arbitration. Nothing in this contract shall preclude arbitration under the Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice of the National Association of Realtors. So instead of going to court, you can arbitrate. Real estate licensed parties. So if anyone in your family is buying a home, you have to declare that you are a party to it accordingly, or you yourself. So the parties acknowledge that Deb Ruef is an active or inactive agent. Remember, inactive agencies also count as notification in Virginia and or Maryland and DC, North Carolina, California, whatever, and is a party, is either the buyer, the seller, or is related to one of the parties, okay? So when I sold my home in April, Deborah Ayers, was an active real estate agent in Virginia, Maryland, and DC, and I am the seller in the property. Well, the woman who bought it for her kids who are at Georgetown, she also, so our paragraph had her name on top of mine, arrow drawn to buyer, that she was a party to the contract. So we were both realtors, so everyone knew that we were both realtors. So any unfair advantage. I had a situation where I was helping an extended family member, not really a relative in the legal sense of the term, but because there was a familiarity there, I declared that person to be a relative. So there's no misunderstanding. You know, being from the South, we often call people that aren't related aunts and uncles, and they may call you aunt or something like that. So because there was that type of relationship, I felt, for me, ethically to declare that this person was part of the family. You know, I probably didn't have to, but I wanted to make sure that there was no collusion or anyone feeling otherwise. So enter agreement. This contract will be binding upon the parties and each of their respective heirs, executors, administrators, successors, and permitted assigns. The provisions not satisfied. The provisions not satisfied as settlement will survive the delivery of the deed and will not be merged therein. This contract, unless amended in writing, contains the final entire agreement of the parties, and the parties will not be bound by any terms, conditions, oral statements, warranties, or representations not herein contained. The interpretation of this contract will be governed by the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Okay? Additions. The following forms, if ratified and attached, are made a part of this contract. This list is not all inclusive of addenda that may need to be attached. So, this is just a bare bones list of the most common contingencies and addenda that could accompany a contract, okay? So the document we just read through is known as the residential sales contract. Okay, it consists of 16 pages. So if I'm a seller and I'm selling a home and I've done a listing agreement with my agent, and my agent has given me a listing agreement, I should be provided with useful information and understanding. The agent should also have me sign a residential disclosure, unless I'm a bank or an heir or it's an estate, or there's some reason I'm exempt, okay? And if my house is not built before 1978, then I don't need to sign lead-based paint. So as someone listing a home, providing a document to potential buyers, I would have the residential disclosure listed online at MRIS. So a buyer makes an offer, and they're a cash buyer. So they would have this 16-page document, and residential disclosure. Okay, those are the first two must documents. Now, if they choose to do a home inspection, whether it be for negotiation or informational purposes only, then you would add that document, yes. Okay, if not, it's no. We know that it wasn't built before 1978, so right up front, it would be no. And this is not our test case. This is just an example right now. We'll go back up in a minute for what we're writing between the Smythes and the Jonases. If there's no contingencies, then it's no. No pre-settlement, yes for the residential disclosure, no FHA, no conventional financing. The seller is an American citizen. There's no well and septic. There's no post-settlement. There's no paint disclosure, and there's no FHA. Now, my cash buyer may say, but I want to make sure that the house is worth what I'm going to pay. So here under other, we can put yes, and we could say appraisal for cash only. So there's appraisal documents that accompany our financing contingencies, which we'll get to next week. And then there's an appraisal for cash only. So in this particular contract, I would have 16 pages of the contract. I would have my residential disclosure, which is the one that says DPOR on it. And I would have my appraisal for cash only. And that would be the entirety of my offer. Okay? So that's the most simplest. But then as you start to build through, so now let's look back at what we're doing here in class with our test case. Okay? So we have our buyers coming in from out of town. He was previously military, so therefore he's going to have a VA loan. That's their choice. They want a home inspection. So yes, under paragraph 41, they're going to have a home inspection. So for your homework and what you're supposed to be pulling together with your contract, you should have home inspection with a yes. They're not going to do a lead-based paint inspection. Even though the house was built in 1977, if you look on here, there's two things here. Again, this is an area where many agents get this incorrect. They see lead-based paint, they see that there, and they see that it was built before 1977, before 1978. In our test case, it was 1977, and they automatically check yes there. And then when they come over here under lead-based paint disclosure, and they also check yes. So as a listing agent, when I see that, I call the other agent and I said, I just want to confirm that your client does intend to do the lead-based paint inspection. Well, no, why would you say that? They would say to me. I said, because you checked yes. Well, no, it's the disclosure said you actually did it in both places. And so more likely than not, it is a mistake, okay? So as a listing agent, remember, you are not just looking at sales price when you get an offer. You should spend more than 3 minutes looking through an offer that you get before you send it to your client. This is how mistakes get made, how we get sideways in deals sometimes. So as you're going down through this, you as a listing agent should know when the home was built, and you should know what you expect to see, and then what do you also find, okay? So here it's saying, so as I'm looking down through here, it says yes to contingencies. So you'll see when we get to the contingency, the first thing I'm going to do as a listing agent, I'm going to start flipping through that contingency page and say, what's the contingency? Oh, that buyer has to sell their house. Oh, it's not on the market. If I have 3 deals, that may not be the priority deal for me, for my client, okay? But, the contingency is there. Pre-settlement, you don't see that very often. You get into squatters' rights there. It's just not a pretty thing. Residential disclosure, again, unless it's an REO foreclosure estate, that should almost always be checked yes. And then your financing. Now, FHA home inspection notice, okay? This is a document. It says, for your protection, get a home inspection. and you guys should have a copy of it in your book. It's kind of have a pink background, I think. It used to be all black, and when you made copies of it, it was terrible. But anyway, when you have an FHA offer, you are required, okay, here it is. It's on page 78. It's just black and white here. Years ago, it was almost all black and writing, but for those for the camera, when you have an FHA financing contingency, your client must receive this document, okay? I just make it a general practice to give it to them regardless, so therefore I'm always covered. They may think they're going VA or conventional, but choose FHA for whatever reason, so I'm covered. It's been given to them, okay? In this case, we're not going conventional. There's no FERPA addendum required because we're American citizens. Now, in our test case, there is a private well, right? So we have to have that contingency, and it's the buyer who's offering that contingency. So remember, it's the buyer and the buyer's agent who initially fills this out. There's not going to be a post-settlement occupancy, so which means the seller is not going to stay in the property after closing. The house was built in 1977, so yes, there is a lead-based paint disclosure, and yes, there is a VA, FHA, or USDA financing. So that would be yes, okay? Now, under the financing comes your appraisal when you have a financing, okay? So that, in essence, are your additions, okay? If a home is declared to be as is, then in the contingencies, let's see, look at page 109. So here's your contingencies and clauses. We've got a guest speaker coming in a few minutes, so we're going to stop in a moment, take a 10-minute break. But in your contingencies and clauses, this is where you're going to find if you have to sell your home, backup contract, and then the as-is clause. So what I want to remind everyone, if you're doing a VA loan, more than likely, you're not going to be able to purchase a property that's listed as is because the VA will not allow their client to pay for or fix the pest. So in an as-is property, what this is stating is that the buyer is giving up all their rights to have these things fixed by the seller. All right. So let's take a 10-minute break till 10 o'clock. We'll have a guest speaker on financing. Rob Gaskins will be with us for a little bit, and then we'll start working through all of our addenda. Okay. All right. Thank you. So the camera's going from that table way over here.
All right, I'm just gonna sit right there.
If you want to.
Okay.
I'm gonna step out for a moment. You got another minute or two.
Okay.
You can turn the mic off if you want, or leave it on. You are being recorded.
Do you all have Highlands pens yet? No. You need to get another one. And you gotta get the swag whenever you can. It's important. And then
When I go to like trade shows or anything, I'm always going to the pens.
and no, this is the best one. The Highlands Key Light. This one actually comes in handy.
Yeah, I like that too.
When Debbie and I had to go to Austin to set up the company, we were training, they said they don't buy pens there. When you go to hotels, when you travel a lot, you take off pens. So every day we take our pen from the hotel and put a new one back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have so many from my travels, so many hotel pens. Look at this. You can get another one.
I used to have so much crap from trade shows. That was my last career.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, as an organizer of trade shows, you know, my customers were always forever putting crap in my hands.
Me too.
And after a while, you know, even though it was something that you don't want to offend your customer, so
You just take it
and then
and
you just, you give it
put it in the back of your car.
On the counter at the service desk. It got really good though.
Take it back to the office and let it do anything.
Yeah. At the end though, it got really good because I had a few customers who would, you know, they'd send word that they wanted me to stop by their booth, you know, during the show or whatever. And inevitably, a couple of them would always have, like this one, she would have like their branded like lunch bag or little lunch cooler kind of thing.
Yeah.
And inside said lunch bag or cooler was like a bottle of Jack or.
See, that is a cool gift.
Those are good gifts. I used to have so many T-shirts that I picked up from trade shows.
Oh gosh.
They had a cool logo on it, and, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I stopped doing that, so I would only get the pens.
Yeah. See, and then I got really picky. I would only take good pens.
Right, I did too. Yeah, I'd only take the really good pens. And sometimes I'd get some stuff for the kids, you know, but.
Yeah. So, Trish, is that a potato?
Oh, no, it's a pear.
Oh, a pear.
Yeah.
It's like, God, it looks like a potato.
I know, it's a Japanese pear.
I don't think I haven't met you. I'm Rob.
Oh, Rob, Trish
Trish.
Collins.
Yeah, pleasure to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
And Dennis. So,
He's one of the sons of our broker.
Steve is my father.
Oh,
Yes.
Steve Collins.
Yeah.
So, I haven't met him yet, but I've been told that I need to meet him.
You will.
That he's the most awesome guy on the planet.
It's, you know, taking out like, you know, him being my father, right? Because I know him really, really well. So, you know, the son father. I am my father. But I will say this. But I will say this. I will say this though. He is a pretty dynamic individual, and he is a leader, and he's developed a culture, which is pretty cool. So I give him credit for that. So.
Okay, for those online, welcome. This is Rob Gaskins. Have you heard? He is one of the sons of Steve.
The better looking and the smarter son of Steve. Son. Don't tell that. Or my brother, who's a rocket scientist down teaching down at the University of Virginia. Literally. Deb, thanks for letting me come in. Deb and I have gone way back. She knows where all the bones are buried. She knows a lot of my bones, where they're buried as well. She's the best, though. She's always been the best. And so, like, when you're going through your training, you're getting A+ training. So it's really, really cool. So, yes, I am with Highlands Mortgage. We originate loans here, and we have a unique partnership with KW, Falls Church. There's 4 loan officers, kind of rotate in and out of the office. We all kind of try to work together. We try to give you the best service that we can give you. There's a lot of different ways you can go with loan officers. You know, we have good rates. We try to team up with you, partner, try to give you marketing advice and help to get new clients. So that being said, welcome to Keller Williams. This is you're in a great office. So if you put everything to test and you work the systems, you're going to be successful here, which is pretty neat. So, if you don't know, and forgive the no S on the officers, if you don't know what loan officers are, we are representatives that help people get mortgages for their homes. It can be on a commercial side, it can be on a residential side. We do residential side at Highlands. We're actually unrolling a new program where we can do new home loans, new builds as well. So we do a number of different things. There's different kinds of loan officers. So the traditional loan officer that you think of at a regular bank, like a Bank of America, USAA, or a credit union such as Navy Federal, they're usually 9 to 5 type individuals, Monday through Friday. They have an array of products that you can use. They sometimes have competitive rates, sometimes they don't. But the big banks, they're there. The problem with big banks is that they're slower. So when you ratify a contract and you say, hey, I need to get this loan closed in 30 days, sometimes the bigger banks will be like, well, we'll try to get it done in 30 days. Us at Highlands will say, no, if you want to, we can get it done in 10 days. So we can move a lot faster. The other side are mortgage brokers. And mortgage brokers are independent individuals who have access to all the bank's different rates. They can go to USAA, they can go to Navy Federal, they can go to Bank of America. They can go to all these different banks and get different rates. However, as soon as you use them, they'll transfer you to that actual bank to actually do the funding of the loan. Us at Highlands, we're mortgage bankers. So what that means is that not only do we have access to all the different rates, so we can get a rate from Evergreen Bank, we can get a rate from USAA, we can do all of that, but we can move at a faster pace than a regular bank. And so we can get something done, within 8-10 days. We can get it done in 30 days. We can get it done on time. Not only that, but we fund our own loans as well. So we'll fund it. If it's a VA loan, if it's an FHA loan, we will keep it in-house. If it's a conventional loan, we'll actually end up selling it off to somebody else in about a month or two. Okay, so the bottom line is that we lend money. That's what lenders do. We lend money, and we lend money to your clients. What's the importance of a loan officer? You need to get your people pre-approved. So let's say you have somebody who comes to you and says, I want to buy a house. And they say, I want to buy $1 million house. And you're like, great. I'm going to go start showing you $1 million houses. So you spend a week, maybe 2 weeks, you're going around, you're showing them $1 million house, and then it creeped up to $1.2 million. You show them this house. Then they say, oh, this house looks great. I want to make an offer. And then you say, okay, all right, let's go get you pre-qualified and run you through the loan process. You come to find out that you run their credit score is in the 500s, which means you really can't get a loan. They don't have adequate income to go buy the home, and they have no cash reserves. So you just wasted 2 weeks of your time going out and showing them these $1 million homes when they were never even qualified to see the home. So a lot of realtors won't even take clients out until they get pre-qualified, or at least they have a range of where this person's income is, what their assets are, and those different factors that really matter when you're getting a loan. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So you always want to say, hey, you got a new client. You don't want to turn them off. Say, yeah, we'll go look at some homes. Will you talk to my lender? Talk to my lender and just get a pre-qual and run your credit and do the small things that you need to do in order to get pre-qualified. So a little bit about Highlands Residential Mortgage. It started 2010 in Dallas, Texas. Now in 10 different states across America. Here in Virginia, We are located in this office here, and we have another office in Centerville. And, there's talks opening up another office here or there, maybe one in Maryland. But right now we have 2. What we do really, really well is we do in-house underwriting and funding. Up at the Centerville office, we have our processors up there who work the loans for us. So we get the loans, we get all the information as your underwriter, as your loan officer, and then we hand it off to our processor, starts processing the information, and then we give it to our in-house underwriters at Highlands Mortgage. So it's a very fluid, it's a great system, how it works, very impressive, and we move at lightning speed. And if you have any questions at all, just pipe up and just ask away. Who am I? So here's my sales pitch on who I am. I was born and raised in the area. Went to Annandale High School just down the road. Attended the University of Virginia on an ROTC scholarship, Army ROTC scholarship. Graduated with a degree in economics, concentration in finance. But when I graduated, there was a war going on. So I immediately got kicked off into Germany, and from Germany went to Iraq. And I don't know if you ever read the book Extreme Ownership that came out, but in that book, there's Army units that talk about kind of stuff that we did in Iraq and Ramadi, Iraq. And then from there, I went and I worked at the FBI for a number of years. And a lot of the stuff we were doing was forensic analysis. And what we were doing is, my official role was IT, but what we were really doing is we were following the money of the bad guys. And if you follow the money, you do the forensics on the money, you find who the people you want to catch and what they're doing. Always is the case. Also got my master's degree along the way in information management. So that's who I am. And this is my mission statement. The summary of this is, I have a passion for helping people. I love working with people. I love connecting with people. I'm more of a face-to-face person. I do like the phone, but I like to sit down and just say, hey, this is me, this is you. Hey, let's see if something clicks here. But I do work on referral. That's my business, 100% referral. And so that means I got to do a really, really good job for you. And let me go back to one of the differences that makes us different too. We work on commission. So as opposed to a banker, they're working off of a salary. So they don't care as much. I mean, there's some that care, some that don't. I mean, like in any industry, but they don't care as much in terms of getting your loan closed and on time. If I don't close your loan on time, or I don't give your service and your clients excellent service, then guess what? You're not going to use me ever again. And I don't want that. I want you to refer me out to your clients. I want you to refer me out to everybody you know. And hopefully that's how you all are going to build your businesses as well in real estate. Okay, so it's about us helping you all. And the question is, what do we bring to the table to help you? So a lot of loan officers, it's a give me, right? It's a, you got a loan for me? You got a loan for me? You got a loan for me? What can I specifically do for you? Well, and let me go to that. I have a deep understanding of real estate. I grew up in a real estate family. I have a father who's obviously in real estate. I have a brother. I have 2 sisters, one down in Austin, Texas, made a fortune down in real estate. Another sister out in California who does some marketing. So I am in a real estate family. I, in fact, had my real estate license in 2012, and I was part of a team that we sold close to $20 million. Was definitely not, I love real estate, but I definitely didn't necessarily want to sell real estate. Buy and sell. I'm a numbers guy. And so that's how I kind of transitioned into saying, hey, I want to be a loan officer. That's what I want to do. Again, I have a degree in economics and finance. While I was actually in Iraq, you go on patrols for 12 hours at a time, and then you come back for 12 hours. So you have a lot of downtime. And while I was there, I actually studied to become a certified financial planner. Took all the classes to do all that. So that's kind of what I did in my downtime. I love following the stock market, bond market, and I'm always aware of interest rates. And again, go back to the win-win. We always want to have a win-win. How are we providing service to you all to help you all get more clients? And here are a couple of things that we can do for you. We can do postcard mailings. I have numerous templates where we can do something similar to this right here. Newsletters, rate sheets, promotional flyers, financing sheets, email campaigns, yard signs, property and agent websites. We do brokers opens. I don't know if you've ever heard of those. And we can provide lunch for you, and we can provide promotional flyers for you. All these things in real estate, all these things start adding up in costs. And so we're able to chip in and usually provide some of these things we can go 100%, some of them we can go 50-50 with you. It just depends on the type of marketing. But it's very, very helpful when you're trying to get started and, you're paying your NVAR dues and you're paying stuff to Keller Williams. I mean, just, it feels like your pockets are empty. One of the big things that we do is we do seminars. We do home buying finance seminars. These are really, really good for first-time home buyers. So you bring them in, or we can sit down one-on-one with them, and we just go through what does it mean to buy a home. And it might even be a good seminar for you all to sit in on as well. It's about an hour and a half seminar. But we go through what does it mean? What does your credit score mean? How do you get your credit score higher if you need to? What are the different loan products that are out there? What does debt to income ratio mean? So we just go through the whole gauntlet and go through the process of, here's what happens when you ratify a contract. Here's what a pre-approval means. How are lenders and real estate agents working together? And if you have some clients, it's also a good time where we can team up together and give a presentation to your client. So it's kind of a team mentality. So those are really good. I'm actually putting on a VHDA loan next month. I would highly recommend that you all come to that. VHDA loan in Virginia is a great loan. There's nothing that can beat it out there. Only a few lenders are allowed to do these loans or even know how to do these loans. I do them really, really well. And my last 2 loans were actually VHDA loans. But there's some tricks to how you do them. VA Loans 101. These are for anybody's former military clients. I love doing VA loans. I love connecting with former veterans or people who are current active duty. And then Investor and Renovations 101s. Another thing that we can do for you is open houses, financing sheets, which describes, hey, here's where the interest rates are right now today, and here's how much it would cost you to buy this home. And that's actually a very, very awesome way to get people coming into an open house to start talking to you. And I've done a couple open houses with agents, and it's a great team thing because somebody will come in, they want to talk about interest rates, and I'll talk about interest rates and where rates are going and how they're doing it. And then we lead into, oh, are you looking to buy a home? Oh, yeah, I kind of am. And then it kicks off the conversation. So it's good teamwork. Gift cards, we can support gift cards as well. We do that all the time. I'm actually giving Deb a couple of gift cards. What's the prize for?
For those who do their homework and
For
show up on the 12th of February, must be present to win.
Must be present to win. So there will be some gift cards that if you do your homework. Special highlight, Highlands financing expertise. And then the biggest thing of all is have expertise in doing loans. FHA loans, VA loans, conventional loans, jumbo loans, USDA loans, all the different loans that you need to do. You need to have confidence that your loan is going to get through. So you ratify a contract, we're going to close in 25 days. I need to make sure that's going to go through. I need to make sure I have a loan officer who's going to communicate with me and is going to make sure that it happens. It's another example of postcards. Selling real estate and doing postcards for other individuals. This to me is pretty big. You team this up with you all have heard of Buffini. Okay, you team this up with the Buffini, get your database together, you're mailing to your database, but you throw these in there every so often. It just gives validity saying, Oh, hey, yeah, Dennis is doing something. Trish is doing something. Yeah, okay. They're legit, especially when you're getting started. You just want to have that validity. And so these little more expensive, these postcards cost, 60 to 70 cents per postcard. We can split it 50-50. We get a little bit of, Highlands marketing at the bottom. But these are for you. These are for you to generate business. What I always say to agents, new agents, I want to help you in the next year get 2 deals. If I can do that, I've added value to you. On a $300,000, $500,000 deal, that's some good money, and that more than pays for anything you're doing with the marketing piece. But this has to be consistent. You have to do this. I always say, I'm not doing it with you unless you're going to do it for a year, because one post, most people just one and done. Oh, I didn't get anything off of it. No, sometimes it takes 2 of them. It takes a 3rd one. It takes a 4th one. They say it takes almost 5 touches. And that's where, if you're doing this in conjunction with the Buffini model, it can really just push your market share. It can push your results to a higher level. This is something I just started with Chris. This is, he wanted to send out a newsletter, so he's doing some of the, his stuff up top. I'm doing some of the rate stuff down at the bottom. He has a little more money to spend. He's not necessarily just getting started, but this is a brilliant idea. And on the back, I don't have a picture of the back. On the back, for his neighborhood, he has the recent sold and how much they sold for. So that's giving a value to that neighborhood. Also, they're opening it up and they're saying, okay, interest rates here, they're going up. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, I better get out and I better sell, or I better tell my son or daughter or my brother to go buy a house now, because if they don't, they're going to be missing out on their purchasing power. So these are some other things that we do. And that's it. That's it. I would love to work with you all. We have a couple other lenders in here too. And how we all work the system is you can work with whoever you want to work with, whoever you feel comfortable with. We kind of randomly assign agents and kind of meet with them. But you go with whoever you feel comfortable with, and different strokes for different folks. As you get to know the personalities of us, like you figure out, okay, maybe this client would be better with this person. Maybe this client would be better with that person. So it's kind of try to work as a team. Any questions? Any questions? All right. Now that's a loaded question. What product exactly? So I'll go back. This is fairly recent. So this is 125 for a 40-year Freddie Mac fix. It's about 4.15, but it's gone up. So for 30 years fixed. Yeah, it's. I'm doing a conventional high bounce, which means that it's more than $455,000. The rate is getting up there. I mean, it's around 4.375. I'll check the rates today. It might even be up at 4.5. So rates in just the past few weeks, in the month of January, we've seen them go up, and they are going up. The Fed has said they're going to raise it at least 3 times this year. They're not buying as many bonds. The stock market is just out of control. So if you do have, and that's another thing, if you do have buyers that are out there right now, I can sit down and with 100% confidence say, you need to get out there and you need to buy now, because rates aren't necessarily, they're not going down. Now, if I had a crystal ball, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd own my own island somewhere, and but I don't have a crystal ball. But I can pretty much say that rates are going to creep up. How much? We don't know. They said they were going to probably get up to like 4.75 to 4.75 by the end of the year. So, and we're already seeing them, we're getting close to that. Same thing. It just depends. It depends on how much you're refinancing. It depends on if you're refinancing with a VA loan, you're refinancing FHA, a conventional loan. Probably like 4.5 last refinance I did was at like 4.375. But again, yeah, you can't take that number and just use it, because it matters what your credit score is. It matters how much debt you have, and it matters what your income is. So it's a huge equation that we got to put all that into. So I think my time is up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'd love to talk to you offline, and I can talk to you, see if it makes any sense. You might be able to get a little bit of a cheaper rate, but at the same time, it might not be worth it, because the recoup your costs might take, 7 years, 5 to 7 years.
What's generally the margin in terms of savings that you generally recommend? Hey, if you can save 0.5%, then it makes sense.
You just have to look at the number. I like to look at that is subjective, because if it's your house that you're going to live in for the rest of your life, it doesn't. If it takes you 5 years to recoup the costs of the refinance, because there's closing costs too, you have to factor in. If it takes you 5 years, sure, maybe, if you're going to live there. But there's some people. This is a transient area. Some people are here for 3 years and gone. So their time frame is more like 2 years, 3. I like to say 3 years, 3 to 4 years. If you can do it, yeah, go for it. But then again, if it's your home that you're living in, you're raising a family, and your kids are there, and you're not going anywhere, then why not do it if you can get a lower rate? If you could get down to 4%, it'd probably be worth it. But the market might not be down at 4% right now. But it could. I mean, a couple months it could, go back down for a little bit.
What's driving the interest rates up?
The Fed. So two things. The Fed, they're not buying as many bonds. So when they during the crisis of 2008, drove the interest rates down, as they were just buying up all these bonds. Okay, and then they were holding them, and now they're not buying as much, and they're selling a lot more. So they're driving the interest rates up. Plus, the stock market is soaring. So we're going to see a lot of the money moving from the stock market back to the bond market. So.
How would the investment house is interest rate is more higher?
Yes.
How much is different from the regular?
Let's talk offline.
Let's get back to.
Deb's gonna kick me out of here. Yeah, thank you, Deb.
We'll hear from Ed on Monday.
Second. All right. Yes.
So we'll have your chance to get to meet Ed and Rich both as well over the course of the next week. And by then we'll have gone through some of the contingencies, and they will be able to answer any questions regarding that. Okay, so all of our miscellaneous documents, contingencies, etc. So page 108 is an addendum. So the first 3 letters in addendum is add. So we're adding to the contract, okay? There's also the word amend, to amend. Now, prior in Virginia, we had addendum/amendment. I think it was just confusing for a lot of people, so they've just simply made it the addendum, so we're adding to. But we're just adding or amending language, or something could, so this is the blank addendum. So if something needs to be agreed upon and not a notice, because when we finished, we were talking about notices, okay, which are unilateral one way. This is, you need agreement by both parties. So if you had to extend settlement for a couple of days, this would be the document you would use, a blank addendum. So when you go into your dot loop, there should be blank addendums, blank notices, and they actually put them in there in number fashion, so you try to remember which number you're on, okay? Because that's what the blank spot next to it here is, identifying what number addendum are we on, So if we're using a blank addendum for the first time, you would input number 1 there, okay? Then this addendum is made on, okay? So let's say today's date, February 2nd, to a sales contract offered on. That is not the ratification date. It's the offer date. It's the date that's on the front page of the residential sales contract, okay, where the ratification date is on page 15. So the date that goes here, in this case, because it's the date offered. Now, periodically, you are going to see phraseology where it's asking for the ratification date. So just be very careful what date you're putting down, okay? For the purchase of the property, so the property address goes in there between the 2 parties above, and then succinctly describe what you're trying to do. Now, we may have a little bit of a challenge sometimes because for years I had to write furthermores and heretofores and hereinds. So sometimes I fight my nature in doing that. But the idea is to keep it just simple language that everyone can agree to, but not so obscure that it leaves openings. So parties agree to this contract is modified as follows. Settlement date changes, or settlement date will be, and in the date, so the month, the date, and the year, do not leave off the year. The month, the date, and the year, that's specific. The month and the date is not specific, right? Month, the date, and year. And that's simply all you really need. You can add a phrase that says, all other terms remain in full force and effect. It's not required. You will see that language. Some people will put that in there, especially if there have been a lot of back and forths. So if I were to take a contract, let's say there's a conflict, like I shared with you guys about that payment of that bonus yesterday, what we did was we took every document during that contractual deal and we laid them out in a timeline. And from my paralegal days, I learned that judges like timelines. They like to see the progression of what happened, when it happened, and what was signed off on. So we were able to lay out in a timeline fashion using pure black and white documentation as to what happened. And it was easy for them to say, okay, yeah, this happened and it was taken care of. If you don't have things laid out in a clear fashion, you don't have your things dated properly, it's harder to do that. So whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side, you're always looking for the finished product. You're always looking to make sure the dates are where they're supposed to be and that it is the correct date, okay? A sidebar for you guys. When you have your buyer and seller sign their agreements, buyer's agreements and listing agreements, when do you send those to your broker for their signature? Immediately. Immediately. Not 2 months later. Not when it's under contract. Because it is not a ratified deal. So how sad for you if one day your seller is reading their contract, their listing agreement because they're upset with you and they're trying to find some loophole and they realize that they've never gotten a ratified copy back from you where the broker signed it. So you really do not have a deal with them. Not only did you not have your broker sign it, you did not return a copy to them. So they can literally walk away from you. And more than likely wouldn't have to pay you expenses because you never had a deal, right? So in an audit situation, it looks very bad for you, the broker, and the broker to have all these unsigned documents out there. It happens all the time. So protect yourself. Your business, this is your business. This is not playtime. This is the legitimate business that is scrutinized and governed by laws. So make sure you get your paperwork in, make sure it's done right. There is a green sheet workshop coming up. I don't know if anyone has seen that, what date it was, and maybe it already passed. Have you guys seen that email about the green sheet? Please get to those classes when you can. You have to fill out the green sheet which is a virtual online document when you have a deal, because you will not get paid until that sheet is completed. So you can go to settlement, and David Robertson can give the checks to Debbie, and they will sit on Debbie's desk until you fill out that green sheet. You will not get paid. That is your ticket to get paid. Because what it does, it memorializes in written form what has happened in the contract, who is involved, where all the money goes. So Debbie just can't receive a check from David not knowing how the money gets dispersed. Did you, Dennis, share the deal with Muhammad? Debbie doesn't know that, but maybe you and Muhammad had an agreement to share a deal. So until that paperwork's filled out memorializing that, the money stays on her desk, okay?
When is the perfect time to do the green sheet?
The perfect time to do the green sheet is the moment a contract is ratified. Now, if anything were to change after it's been ratified and somehow it's affected your commission, let's say, for heaven forbid, that you have to give up some of your commission to appease the situation, that is really always your last resort. It is not your fault that the buyer and seller have an issue. Your commission should not be the first thing that's given away. And you'll find other agents will say, come on, Dennis, my seller really can't afford to fix this $1,000 issue. Why don't each of us throw in $500? You say, no. I'm not responsible, and I'm not taking food out of my children's mouths to fix your seller's issue. No, I'm not. Buyer and seller cannot negotiate my commission away. No. Now, if you, listing agent, want to, fine, but I'm not giving up any of my commission. It's the last resort. And before you give up your commission, you have a conversation with Sheila or Steve. They will allow you to do it, because Keller Williams gives you that discretionary, we do a formality of doing the credit letter to the broker, but you really want to think through, and the more experience you glean and gather and from your deals, you will learn how to posture yourself and working and maybe finding other solutions, okay, as opposed to right away going to giving up your commission. And that's a very common thing out there, giving up your commission, and just don't do it. But anyway, the green sheet has to be done. Certainly, if you're going to closing that day, you want to get it done. If you're the listing side, Debbie can go out to MRIS and pull a report and see if the office has 100 listings. And then she can go in and say, but I only have 25 green sheets for listings, So after a while, she might be concerned, what's going on? You haven't started any paperwork or whatever, or there's no dot loop. There are some of us that don't use dot loop for our forms per se. And so I would say some of that is some of them are guilty about getting things put into dot loop and getting things done properly. Okay. So moving on to, all right. So now the contingencies and clauses. So again, it's an addendum. It's adding to our basic contract. And it's to the contract that was offered on such and such date with our buyer. So in our case, William S. Mary J. Is that what it is? You guys have to remind me. I tell you on the first day, you'll see who listened. And then the John Jonas and Jane Jonas. Okay. And our property, 1234 Mars Road. Now, in our particular scenario, we're not having any of these contingencies, but you guys need to understand what they are. So contingency, sale of buyer's property and kick out. All right. This contract is contingent until, and what day do we put in here? Well, that's up to the parties. It's negotiable. From the buyer's perspective, they wanted as much time as they can possibly get, and the seller wanted the short amount of time as they can possibly get. So let's just say 20 days. This contract is contingent until 9 p.m., 20 days after ratification upon the sale of the buyer's property located. So then you put the buyer's address where they currently live. Okay. If buyer does not satisfy, amend, or remove this contingency by the deadline pursuant to subparagraph 3 below, this contract will become void. So it says if buyer does not satisfy, amend, or remove pursuant to subparagraph 3. So you skip down to subparagraph 3 so you know what it's saying. Buyer may, A, satisfy this contingency by delivering to a seller a copy of a ratified contract for the sale of buyer's property with evidence that all contingencies other than financing and appraisal have been removed and waived by deadline. So, Dennis, you're going to list your property because you've written this contract to Muhammad and you're saying, okay, Muhammad, within 20 days, I'm going to sell my property, but it's not going to close yet. But I'm going to deliver to you within the 20th day a contract where the home inspection has been removed and any other inspections except for financing and appraisal, because those are really on the lender and their agencies to get done. So the person who's purchasing your property cannot control that time frame, but they can control the time frame of home inspections and stuff like that. Okay. So Ben, at the end of that paragraph, I'm sorry, online. At the end of subparagraph A, the word or, it's not and, it's or. They bolded and they capitalized it, so it's or. So remove this contingency, so subparagraph B, we're still 3B, remove this contingency by delivering to the seller a letter from the lender stating that the financing is not contingent in any other manner upon the sale and settlement of any real estate or obtaining a lease of any real estate, that the buyer has sufficient funds available for a down payment and closing costs necessary to complete settlement. Or 2, evidence of sufficient funds available to complete settlement without obtaining financing. Okay? And then we continue on. So now we're at subparagraph 4. Okay, so we've done subparagraph 3, which talks about in the first opening paragraph up here. So paragraph 3B could be that perhaps the seller may have had other property that they were able to sell, other property they were able to lease, could have CDs, 401ks, money markets that they were able to cash in and access money where they don't actually need to have financing to buy the new home, and they don't have to sell their current home. Maybe they're going to fix it up and sell it after they move. Maybe they're going to lease it, but it doesn't have to happen prior to the purchase. So something in their financial picture changed that allowed them to remove the contingency, okay? And then A means they have to get a contract, okay, on their current property or a lease. Sometimes a lender will accept a rental in lieu of purchase. Again, everyone's financial picture is different. So the seller's financial picture in this case matters. What will their lender allow? Do they have a good financial history? Do they have a good credit history? Does the lender feel assured that if they were to rent out house A, they would be able to buy house B and can maintain it if they're always collecting rent? And maybe they have to be assured that that person that's going to rent from them is also stable. So there's a trickle effect here. Okay, so now we go back up to paragraph 1 because we skipped to paragraph 3. Okay, seller may continue to offer property for sale and accept a bona fide backup offer to this contract until this contingency is satisfied or removed. If a backup offer is accepted, seller will deliver notice to buyer requiring that this contingency be removed or satisfied pursuant to paragraph 3 below, which we just read, but not later than 9 p.m. blank days after the notification. So again, this is what seller is choosing to put in here. Now the buyer might put 7 days or 10 days, the seller may say, no, I'm only going to give you 3 days when the time comes. Okay? So that's negotiable there. Again, it's the buyer who's making the offer, the buyer who's invoking the contingency, but the seller can negotiate on the other side. Days after delivery of this contract will become void. If buyer fails to satisfy or remove the contingency by deadline, this contract will become void. So in paragraph 1, it's protecting the seller in such a way that the seller is going to keep, it's not going to be active in MLS, it's going to be under contract, but it's going to have the word with a kickout, because this is a kickout clause. If you see at the top, it says the word kickout here. So it's saying that the seller has an out to literally kick the buyer out of the deal if a better offer comes by. Now, it has to be a bona fide backup offer, okay? So we'll go flip over to page 111. So that you understand what a bona fide backup offer means. A backup contract. This contract is the first backup to another contract dated between, okay, so I'm an agent and I go online and I see that the property I want to buy is contingent with a kickout. So I call the listing agent and I say, we want to make a bona fide backup offer. Could you give me the information, the date of that, your original offer, and who the buyers are, because we know who your sellers are. So we list it in here, okay? So this contract is the first backup offer to another contract dated between seller and so-and-so as buyer. So we're clarifying who we're backing up to, okay? This contract becomes the primary contract immediately upon the notice from seller that the other contract is void. All deadlines contained in this contract shall be measured from, and you want to put in there the date of contract becomes primary. Don't waste your client's money doing it ratification, because we're going to ratify the backup offer, but we don't want our contingencies to start clicking until we're in primary position. We don't want to spend our client's money. Okay. Additionally, settlement date will be blank days after this contract becomes primary. Buyer may void this backup offer at any time by delivering notice to the seller prior to delivery notice from the seller that this contract has become a primary contract. If the other contract settles, this contract will become void. The rights and obligations of the parties under this primary contract are superior to the rights and obligations of the parties to this backup contract. So, a bona fide backup offer means that you're submitting a full contract with all its contingencies, all the financings involved, and the earnest money deposit. That earnest money deposit for a backup offer has to be rendered. It has to be submitted to the broker or the title company, whoever's holding that money. And that's what makes it a bona fide offer. That means that they just can't flip it and say, oh, no, it's over with. They have to know that there's skin in the game. So that seller wants to know that if A does not come through with their promise to get their house sold and move forward, that I can kick them out. Seller can kick the buyer out and take backup offer, okay? Now, a seller is not going to kick out a buyer if there's nobody waiting in the wings, right? They're going to play the game if they can. They want to sell their house. But if there is someone waiting in the wings that's a bona fide offer, then they have that option to kick the buyer out. Now, as you read in the backup offer, the buyer who's made that backup offer can, at any point in time, prior to being made primary, void with a simple notice that we're removing our offer. And they would send a release and get their earnest money back. So maybe another house came open in the same neighborhood that meets their criteria, and they want to act on it right away. Okay? they can also have those same funds just held and just assigned to the new contract. So without having to have the money still has to be officially released from the one contract, but they can have those funds without giving them back to them and send them back. They can just have them assigned to the new contract. Any questions? Yes, Dennis, your mic.
So I'm a little confused about the kind of the timeline between paragraph A of contingencies and number 1. So say, for instance, I'm the buyer. I want to try and sell my house, and I ask for 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So paragraph 1, they get a bona fide backup offer. What do you then put in the blank for number 1? Is that saying that I can basically kill this by just simply giving them notice within, that I'm giving them, 10 days notice that I have a bona fide backup, or what's the timing?
Okay, so the seller has agreed to give you 30 days, and now they have a backup offer. So they can then, by requiring that this contingency be removed or satisfied pursuant to paragraph 3 below, no later than 9 p.m. blank days following delivery. So what goes there is a negotiated time that once the seller notices you they've given you 30 days. So they can't kick you out in under 30 days if they've given you 30 days. But at the end of the 30 days, have you not satisfied, according to either one of the paragraphs down here, and they get a bona fide backup offer, here it's saying they can kick you out within, say, 3 days. They're going to give you a notice, a unilateral notice that says, look, you have to either perform under paragraph 3, one of these 2 ways, or I'm taking the backup offer, you're out. So it gives the buyer 3 days to make that financial decision.
So basically, it's if you start off with 30 days, then I'm giving you 3 more days to perform or else.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And again,
That can happen within, you give the buyer 30 days, and then 10 days later, you get a backup offer.
correct.
You can say to the buyer at that point, hey, listen, I gave you 30 days, but I'm gonna give you 3 now, because you have to give them 30, then you give them another 3.
Right. So now you could have given them 30 days. So let's say seller gives the buyer 30 days and there's no backup offers. The 30 days has expired and the listing agent and the seller, there's no backup offers. No one's seen the house. Seller could force them to commit, but chances are that could be a suicide move because the buyer could then say, we can't, and we're out. So generally speaking, when there's not a backup offer, the seller's not going to force them to get out. The seller may ask for an amendment to change the date, but in a lot of cases, they just let it slide. But then the minute a backup offer comes through, the seller then can give notice. Okay. So then paragraph A2 says buyer's property will be listed exclusively and actively marketed by a licensed real estate broker and entered into the multiple listing service within blank days after the date of ratification at such and such price. So maybe it's already listed. The buyer put it on the market simultaneously to them starting to look for property. Well, then you can just simply say that it is currently listed. And you can provide along with your offer, a copy of that listing from the MLS. So you can just modify that to say that it's already listed, or you put in there how many days. So you might put 10 days and the seller may say, no, you need it on the market in 5 days. And, and if you say for $500,000, the seller, if I'm a listing agent, I may see what homes are going for in that area. Is 500 overpriced? It's going to be slow to sell, or are they pricing it aggressively to sell it quickly? So you could ask questions about that. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. It's the way you ask and keep it professional. Okay. So now, as we move on to paragraph 4, yes.
If seller give 20 days, let's say, that period, and
I'm sorry, seller what?
20 days.
20 days, okay.
And backup contract, they receive like will be 10 days.
Okay.
Then still the seller have to wait for that.
Yes, because they've given them that time.
Before they accept that backup order.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't say they can preclude it.
They can just accept it right away. They have to wait.
You have to wait.
Right, because it's the deadline, it's pursuant to paragraph 3, right? So they've given a deadline, and it's pursuant, the discussion is pursuant to the deadline given. So they can't circumvent that and say, look, I gave you 20 days and I've got a backup offer at 10 days, so I want to kick you out. No. They may try.
So would you, as a seller?
Mike, it's okay.
So would you, as a seller, you've given somebody 30 days notice, a backup offer has come in, would you give them the 3-day notice at day 27 to say, look, there's a backup offer, you have 3 more days left? Or would you have to wait until the full 30 is over before you gave them 3 more days?
It doesn't say that you can't. You have 3 days, so you're not supposed to notify them I would say because they're given the deadline that no, you can't. You would have to do it on that date because you would be circumventing their actual deadline. You'd be pre-noticing them to their deadline.
Right. But you're not under any obligation to give them more time once their deadline is up.
No, not at all. Not at all. You can say 0 days, yeah. Again, that's negotiable. That's totally negotiable. Again, the buyer is asking for as many days as possible. The seller is trying to get as few days as possible. And when you're back and forth counter offers, it's the contingencies where you're going to see the most strike-throughs, the most discussion.
Even the backup offer is more better than that. Right?
Correct.
You still have to wait.
You still have to wait. Now, so this is what happens.
I'm more excited. I got more money now, more better offer.
Right.
Yeah, but you already have a contract.
So let's say day 3, you just ratified. Day 3, you get a backup offer, $10,000 more. Day 4, the first offer does their home inspection. They find $5,000 or $6,000 in repairs, or they've asked for that. As the seller, no, absolutely no. So then the buyer has to decide, am I going to move forward or not? See, the buyer does not have to know that there's a backup offer. So they may not know why that seller is refusing to fix something. And if they void, then the backup offer takes primary right away. If they void the contract based on home inspection.
Buyer can back up if they don't want it.
Right, based on home inspection and if there's HOA or condo. And the buyer can void, right, if seller, and that's what the seller might be hoping for. He's got $10,000 extra coming in now. What the seller does have to do, though, because he's received the home inspection report, he now has to disclose to the new buyer fully everything in that home inspection report. Once he has knowledge of defects, as does the agent, it has to be disclosed. So it's wrong for a listing agent to say to their client, I don't want to see your home inspection report. They have to, once it's done, it's out there in the public, they have to notice it, they have to let someone know. Now, if it's a GFI and it's a grandfather situation, it's not a big deal. There might be 5 bathrooms and a kitchen, which encompasses, 14 GFI switches, but the house is grandfathered and is not required to have GFI. But, it's one of those things, and, let's say they're $10 a piece. It's not a lot of money, but for some people it becomes a big deal. So if someone were to get out on home inspection, the seller has knowledge, but it's not hurting the seller. They're just going to they just let the other people know what the home inspection report says. But if it is something like the roof is damaged, the HVAC is old, then their backup offer is going to have their own home inspection or take possession of the other one and then want things fixed. They can do that. But anyway, so page 110, paragraph 4. If buyer satisfies the requirements of subparagraph 3 above, which means they've satisfied and removed the contingency either by listing their property and have a bona fide contract, or their lender has deemed them financially able to purchase without getting a contract, this contract will remain contingent upon the settlement of the sale of the buyer's property. So that's really subparagraph 3A, right? Because 3B is not requiring them to sell. This paragraph will survive the satisfaction of the contingency for the sale of the buyer's property. Settlement under this contract may not be delayed more than, again, negotiable, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. It's in the buyer's interest to have more. It's in the seller's interest to have less. More than blank days after the settlement date specified in this contract, without the parties' written consent, seller will or will not accept an assignment of funds. So, buyer has a ratified contract. It's closing on Friday, February 2nd. And this contract is due to close on February 6th, okay? Which is Tuesday. So if the seller does not accept assignment of funds, that means that the contract has to be the settlement has to happen today. The money has to be there. It's got to be put on record on Monday. The money has to immediately be dispersed and has to be available to be turned back over to another title company on Tuesday for that deal to close. So most title companies work well together in wiring and assigning funds. So it's a guarantee between them. So title company A could say to title company B, this was doing the closing today and this was doing the one on Tuesday. Yes, we have the funds from the buyer are here. We are closing. They let them know the moment closing is finished. We will be on record. Our plan is to go on record first thing we can on Monday, providing the courthouse and everybody else. And then once that's over with and we're on record in Virginia because we're wet settlements, then once it's on record, then the monies can be dispersed accordingly. So this title company is going to send a wire to this title company. Now, the wires don't necessarily transfer immediately. We like to think they do, but sometimes they don't. But there's a number that the wires, when they get sent over, that they can see internally. So the money's on its way. Hasn't maybe not physically arrived by Tuesday morning, but it is on its way. Settlement happens on Tuesday, goes on record on Wednesday. By then the money's there, it's cured, and we can move on with disbursement. Because remember what David said, they have to disperse within 48 hours. Right? So if the money's not there, they can't disperse and the deal doesn't go forward. So if something stops settlement, like in my case I told you guys about where the seller had a lien that no one knew about till the day of settlement. She could not get it cleared up in that first 48 hours. So the buyer's money had to go back to Highlands until that seller cured that issue. And then Highlands had to reissue the money. Okay. And then we can move forward in settlement. All documents had to be re-signed.
Deb?
Yes.
Can you explain what assignment of funds is?
That's what it is. So it's assigning the title company is saying from one title company to another, we're going to assign the proceeds from the seller's home here, where seller A is buyer A. So seller is selling here and they're buying over here. So they're selling here, they're getting escrow money. But I don't want to send it to Dennis. I don't want to send it to your bank, Dennis, because if I send it to your bank's got to let it cure. for 4 or 5 days because you've got, $200,000 dumping into your bank. They got to make sure it's legitimate. The Fed still has a 5-day caveat, even in cashier's checks and stuff. They can still make sure that the funds are actually there because someone can send a wire and stop a wire. Someone can get a cashier's check and stop a cashier's check. So there's still that cure period with banks. So an assignment is a guarantee basically between one title company to the other that the funds are securely here and we're going to send them to you securely. Though we think we're doing it in 24 hours, it could be 48, but the funds are there. So very rare would a seller object to an assignment of funds, and if they did, then you have to have a space between buying and selling and buying. You have to have time for the money to go from the title company into your bank account, out of your bank account to the next deal. Now, one way to cure that is selling at the same title company. Then the funds are there. It's still an assignment, but the funds don't have to move from bank to bank. Okay. If a further delay is required to obtain coinciding settlements, and that's what it means, they're coinciding settlements. One settlement triggers the other. Now, you could do them both on the same day, and if you ever do that, definitely want the same title company. That just cures a lot of issues right there. And you have to do them in the right order. The sellers, you have to sell your home before you can buy the other home. So as you're selling that home, you have to sign as the seller. The buyer has to sign as the buyer. The money has to be there from the lender. And by the way, a title company should never let you sign documents if the money's not there from the lender. So it's not inconceivable that you show up at settlement at 10 o'clock in the morning and the title company says, well, we can go ahead and get started, but we don't have your loan documents yet because the money's not here from the lender. So they haven't finalized the loan package. Now, this day and age, we're not supposed to have that. You're supposed to have 3 to 7 days to review it. But sometimes things happen at last minute. My advice is do not settle on a Monday. And don't settle afternoon on a Friday. It's a lot of traffic. But anyway, Mondays are tough to settle, especially if your client has a bank that's on the West Coast. Mondays are really tough. So try to avoid Mondays if you can. Okay, if a further delay is required to obtain coinciding settlements, buyer may, at the buyer's option, declare the contract void in writing. Nothing herein shall prohibit the parties from mutually agreeing to extend settlement date under terms acceptable by both parties. If at any time after the date of ratification, the contract for the sale of the buyer's property becomes void, buyer will immediately deliver notice to the seller together with evidence of such voiding, at which time either seller or buyer may declare this contract void by delivering notice to the other party. So the buyer has a contingency that's been kicked out. It's been satisfied by paragraph 3, subparagraph A, but subsequently the buyer buying their home, because they're now the seller, has voided on HOA, for example. So once that happens, the buyer for this contract has to notify the seller that they know that their contract's been voided, at which time the seller, referring back to paragraph A here, can decide to extend this back up, kick out, or void if they have a backup offer. They may not have a backup offer. So they mutually agree on what they want to do. It might be a situation where the buyer's like, I'm tired of playing roulette right now. I'm just going to see if I can get my house sold, and I'm going to back out of this offer. And they can do that. They can void. But again, it's an agreed upon. It can be extended. It can be voided by either party. The seller may say, look, I'm tired of playing this game, and I'm going to void. Okay? But chances are, if both really want to buy and sell and there's no other offers, they're going to extend their agreement in some fashion. Okay? But the main thing to remember here is that the buyer is covered through settlement. It clearly states that. Okay? Settlement of buyer's property. Settlement of his contract is contingent upon the settlement of the contract for the sale of the property located at, okay, The settlement under this contract may not be delayed more than X amount of days after the settlement date specified in this contract without the parties' written consent. Seller will or will not accept an assignment of funds. So this is just like a double checking on paragraph 4 up here. Both cover you to settlement. Thank you. Both cover you if it doesn't settle. I think it's just to clarify. From my perspective, it's like it seems redundant to me, but it's just like, okay, we want to make sure that you understand that we are going to settle before we move forward. Okay? The language is virtually the same. And then contingent on the seller purchasing another home. So Muhammad's listed his house, right? Trish come in and wrote a contract right away on the first day, and Muhammad's going, oh my gosh, she wants to move in 30 days. I have not even begun to look yet. My wife hasn't even got her list together yet. We didn't think our house was going to settle this quickly. So once you get your contract from her, you can pull out this as a seller and say, okay, we want to make sure we're covered. And you evoke paragraph C. Okay? So you're saying we want a contingency saying that we're going to be able to find a home of our choice. So this contract is contingent, X amount of days, again negotiable, 20, 30, whatever, days after ratification to allow the seller to ratify a contract for purchase on another home and conduct whatever due diligence seller deems necessary under the terms of the seller's contract to purchase another home. This contract will terminate at deadline, and this contract will remain in full force and effect unless seller delivers notice to buyer prior to deadline that the contract is void. Okay? So, pretty straightforward. The seller is covering themselves that they're not going to be homeless, okay? And you're giving yourself time to go find a property and get it under contract and ratified. But then you can void if it doesn't happen for you. It gives you, a seller, the option to void, okay? General, this contract is contingent until blank days after ratification because. So it could be that you want to study on something on the land. Maybe you want to buy 3 acres and have a horse barn, and you want to know how much it's going to cost. You really want to know what the costs are going to entail. You really love this property off 100 Mill somewhere. It's got the right trees and the slope and stuff, but the barn there is dilapidated, and your daughter wants a horse. Well, you can put a feasibility study to have an architect or someone come in and evaluate that, which is separate from a home inspection. So it'd be something that's other than your home inspection, other than a well, other than a septic, something. Or that you want to tear the home down and rebuild. So you want time for an architect to come in and evaluate. So whatever it is, you write it down, what the time is, and it's negotiable. And then, again, you either void or you remove the contingency. Okay. Backup offer we already went over. Going back to our as-is property conditions, the following terms in this contract are hereby amended and check all that apply. So if someone just has an as-is listed online and they say use the as-is contingency and they haven't specified or they didn't give you a copy of this in their documents to say this is what we want checked, then discuss it with your clients. Are you okay giving all these terms up as is? All clauses pertaining to delivery of property free and clear of trash, debris, broom clean, and are deleted. So that means I can leave all my junk in the house, okay? Or are you willing to accept that? The house is a hoarder's house. It's full of junk. And it's as is. Are you willing to accept all the junk left in the house? Okay? Buyer assumes responsibility for compliance with all laws and regulations regarding smoke detectors. That's not a big deal. That's not a lot of money, but you still, because the contract says they have to be there, you are taking liability on that they're not. So you're telling your insurance company that you are going to get smoke detectors in the house and be in compliance with your insurance company. Okay? All clauses pertaining to termites and wood destroying insects are deleted. Again, in a VA loan, the buyer cannot give up this right. All clauses pertaining to seller's compliance with all orders or notices of violation to any county or local authority are deleted. So if Fairfax County has noticed the house to be uninhabitable, you can't buy it and live there. You're assuming all those notices. You're assuming everything on your shoulders, okay? All requirements for the sellers to comply with property owners and condo owners association notices of violations related to the physical condition of the property are deleted. So that means if there are violations that the fascia board is dilapidated, needs to be replaced and painted, you are assuming that responsibility. And once you take possession of the home, you are then finable until it's corrected. And some associations will fine you on a monthly basis. Okay? And it just keeps accumulating until you correct it. So that's the as is. So when you are selling helping someone find a property, so you're representing the buyer, and you see as is clause mentioned in the listing, go back up and read the general notes. Find out if you see the words investor's dream, which means it's a cash only. It is not loanable. No lender will loan on it. Okay, that's one of those little tricky words where they, without them saying there's no loan available. I mean, someone might get a private loan, but in generally speaking, it's cash only. As is. So you've looked at the property. So as a listing agent, if your client says, I'm not going to fix anything, I am just not going to fix anything. And you're looking at them and go, well, what are you talking about? Oh, the carpet's got a tear in it. The blind, one of the blinds upstairs are missing. I'm just not going to fix anything. You're like, okay, that's fine. We can just say no to that in a home inspection. But if we put online that it's as is put a negative connotation out there. So you're representing the seller at this point, and you're telling them we don't want to say it's as is because you might be missing a good portion of the market that may not even come to look at your home. And you walk in, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing really wrong. Now, if they know that there's a foundational crack or something, then they're supposed to disclose that anyway. So to say it's as is, okay, it's as is, and there's a foundational crack. Okay, that's okay. It's as is, and there's a foundational crack. So when your client calls you up and says, hey, there's this great house in Manassas, it's on a lake, and I can't believe it, it's only $175,000. You're like, yeah. There's something wrong, let's really look at this listing, 4,000 square foot house, there's something wrong. So when you start looking at investor's dream, well, it's got a cracked foundation. Someone's got to come in there and fix it, tear it down, do whatever. So before you run out as buyer's agents and start showing property like this, when it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. There's something wrong. So you take a step back, you make a few phone calls, and you try to figure it out. So as is condition, again, be very careful when you use it, when you're representing the seller. If it's not absolutely required, then try not to use it. It could just be certain items, as in your listing agreement. Remember, those who went through it, we had refrigerator is as is. That's just refrigerator, okay? All right. Unrepresented seller or builder and buyer's broker, okay? Paragraph C. Unrepresented seller or builder and buyer's brokers, upon seller's irrevocable instruction, it is understood and agreed by all parties that, so whoever the cooperating broker's name is, of the cooperating broker's firm, so in our case, Steve Gaskins of Keller Williams Realty Falls Church, is acting as an agent solely representing the buyer in this transaction and has a buyer brokers. Seller agrees to pay, so the seller is agreeing to pay the broker a payment of blank dollars in cash or a percentage of the total sales price. So this is a FSBO, right? For sell by owner, FSBO, FSBO for sell by owner. FSBO is what that stands for, or a builder. So it could maybe not be a big building company, it might be a private builder. I've purchased a piece of property, I've built a home, and I'm selling it without an agent because I know everything. I'm so smart, I know everything. But a good buyer's agent has come to me and negotiated with me, and this is what they're going to use. So when they prepare the offer for the FSBO, the builder, they're going to use this paragraph, and I'm going to, as the seller, an unrepresented seller, I'm going to agree to the commission and write it in here. It becomes a part to the contract. So that's the guarantee of the commission that's going to the buyer's agent, the buyer's broker, okay? Okay, so settlement agent is irrevocably directed to deduct buyer's broker fee from the seller's proceeds of the seller's settlement. The parties acknowledge that the buyer's broker relationship was disclosed to the seller and or seller's agent prior to showing property to the buyer. Now, it says unrepresented seller, but what about all of a sudden they get an attorney or something? That's okay, they can, but it doesn't change the fact that they entered this in unrepresented in some way, shape, or form, and they've offered this commission, and it's irrevocable. They cannot revoke it, okay? So 1031 exchange, I'm not going to teach on 1031 exchange, but we're going to read the paragraph. Property is being acquired to complete an IRC section 1031 tax deferred exchange pursuant to an exchange agreement. This settlement will be coordinated with, and that is a 1031 exchange company. There's a company that you go to help you do your 1031 exchange. Succinctly, a 1031 exchange, so if a buyer is buying it with a 1031 exchange, that means that they have sold property. Could be one property, could be multiple properties, but they've sold a property, but they don't want to have tax implications from it. So under a 1031 exchange, they are given so many days to identify a new property and so many days to purchase said property. So if they sell one property for $2 million, they can purchase 8 properties, right? $250,000 a piece, and it's the same. They've used the money, they've gone through the 1031 exchange company, so it's an IRS thing. It's to do with their taxes and their taxability. So you as agents, whether you're representing the listing or the buyer, you just have to know that there's someone else involved there might be paperwork that has to be acknowledged or signed about the 1031 exchange. It doesn't affect you as a buyer, doesn't affect you as a seller per se, except there's a timing. So where it would affect a seller is if the contract is being done on the very last day and there can be no extensions. Because if that buyer doesn't get that property under that time frame, they lose their 1031 exchange exemption. So then they're liable for the taxes. So that's why they have to notice it, because deadlines become extremely important. And most people are doing a 1031 exchange. They don't want to wait till the last day. And so many buyers will identify more properties than they need to purchase to protect themselves, because they only have so many days to identify property. Okay? So just be aware that if that language comes up, depending on what side you're on, it may or may not affect scheduling and timing. Okay? And the person organizing it for that person, the 1031 exchange company, will be giving you papers to fill out and complete. Okay, seller and buyer agree to transfer property by utilizing the IRC section 1031 tax deferred exchange. Buyer agrees to cooperate with the seller at no expense or liability to the buyer for the completion of the exchange, including execution of all necessary documents. So the buyer is saying, I'm going to sign whatever you need me to sign, because I understand you have a 1031 exchange. The intention of the parties being that the seller utilizes section 1031 to defer taxes by acquiring like-kind real estate through an exchange agreement established at settlement. The parties will execute all necessary documents as determined by an intermediary, that's who was up on the paragraph above, at settlement, which documents are prepared at the seller's expense. So the seller is paying for the expenses, if they're the ones doing the 1031 to sell. Okay, so the party who's not in the 1031 should not have any extra expenses in any way, shape, or form. Real estate cooperative, paragraph F. Virginia Real Estate Cooperative Act, seller has delivered or will deliver to the buyer the required public offering statement. If the statement was delivered prior to the date of ratification, then the buyer has 10 days from the date of ratification to void this contract by delivering a notice to the seller. If the statement was delivered after the date of ratification, the buyer will have 5 days from the receipt of the statement of the date of settlement, whichever comes first, to avoid the contract by delivering notice to the seller. So this is for the properties that are the cooperatives, like the co-ops and stuff.
Basically just like the condo or homeowner stocks, except for change.
Correct. Yeah. We don't have too many co-ops around here. You'll hear of River Place. And again, when your client says, hey, there's a piece of land for sale for $60,000 in Arlington, I want to go see it. It's a parking spot. Or it's a storage unit. No. So, that's what it is. Okay. So except as modified by this addendum, all the terms and provisions of the contract are hereby expressly ratified and confirmed and will remain in full force and effect. So unless this few pages of this contingency, these 4 pages, has changed something substantially that was in the original contract, that nothing else changes. Only if this has made a change to the original contract does it then change. So when someone presents a contract and someone counters back with, so you have the contract and all the addenda like home inspection and financing, but then the seller says, oh, I need to have a home of sale contingency. So this now becomes a new part to the contract. It's presented back to the buyer. The buyer has to agree to it. If the buyer doesn't agree to it, then the contract may not go forward. It may never get ratified. But once it is agreed to, then it becomes a party to the original contract, and only what in here changes that, okay? All right, so let's do the VA financing. All right. You guys can all share that you've gone through the boringest class possible. We'll probably wrap up a few minutes early today. You need a stretch? Okay, we'll take about a 3 or 4 minute break. Let's finish this back up for today. All right, so we've got the VA contingency in here. So, and our case study that we're doing with the SMIs, they're using the VA financing contingency. On Monday, those who are here, everyone here and online, Ed Duncan will be in to talk about financing and such. And one of the things that you need to know is when you are working with your client and interfacing and referring a lender to them, what can you do to check in with that lender, make sure you get the right paperwork, make sure you get your lender letter, and encouraging your client to talk with them, because you want to make sure you know what their financial picture is, what loan package they're using, okay? So with the VA financing addendum, it says, notice, the parties should not include a separate appraisal contingency to this contract, since the federally mandated appraisal language for VA loan is contained in the VA notice of value in paragraph below. So you'll be surprised how many times we'll get an extra appraisal contingency. So it's not required. It's part and parcel to this contract. Deed of trust, buyer shall pay upfront a monthly mortgage insurance premium as required by lender guidelines. Buyer shall pay the VA funding fee as required by the VA regulations, subject to lender's approval. Buyer reserves the right to finance the VA funding fee, in which event such amount shall be added to the loan amount. So in a VA loan, it's not unheard of that it's 100% financing, because they're financing the funding fee. Nor is it unheard of to see on the settlement statement that the amount of money is higher than the sales price. So it's going to be more. So what I'm saying is, on the front page of the contract, the financing could be 101%. So it's more than the actual cost of the property. Okay, because it's 100% plus the funding fee. So it's the cost of the property plus the funding fee. So it could be, the financing could be 101% or 102%, whatever it is. Okay. All right. Okay. So this contract is contingent until, generally speaking, you put at least 21 days in there. You could put 28. You could put 40. Again, it's negotiable. If the seller thinks it's too many days, they're going to ask you to back off. Now, when the laws changed a couple years ago, people were putting in 28 days because they weren't sure they're going to be able to get it done. But we can get VAs done in less than 30 days if your buyer gets their ducks in a row and gets all their information into the lender. Then it's not a big deal. But the minimum you want is 21 days. After ratification of deadline, upon buyer obtaining and delivering to the seller a written commitment or conditional commitments, as the case may be, for the financing described in the specified price and specified financing paragraph of the contract. So page 1 of the contract. Okay. If this contingency has not been satisfied by the financing deadline, this contingency will continue up and including settlement date. However, upon expiration of the financing deadline, seller may, at the seller's option, deliver notice to the buyer that the buyer has 3 days to void the contract. If buyer does not void the contract within 3 days following delivery of the seller's notice, this contingency is removed and the contract will remain in full force and effect with no finance contingency. So there's a finance contingency for 21 days. 21 days is passed and nothing has happened. The buyer did not deliver to seller a notice removing the financing contingency. They may already have the appraisal in and everything's fine, because this says that it continues up to including the day of settlement, but the seller may have a backup offer. The seller might be nervous, and they're telling the buyer, you have to deliver me a notice to get out of this, that you want to void. So the seller may, at the seller's option, deliver a notice to the buyer that the buyer has 3 days to void the contract. Okay? So the seller says to the buyer, I want notice that this is expired, or I want you to void the contract. But if the buyer does not void the contract within 3 days following delivery of the seller's notice, this contingency is removed. So the contingency is removed. So the buyer is not covered under contingency any longer. So they can't get out on a contingency. And the contract remains in full force and effect without a financial contingency. So if the buyer doesn't void the contract, it's not automatically voided. It just means the contingency no longer stands. Okay? The contract itself is still standing, and that means the buyer cannot get out on financing. But then there's always caveats. This contract will become void if, prior to satisfaction of this contingency, buyer receives a written rejection from the lender or lenders to whom buyer has applied pursuant to paragraph 2 for the specified financing and delivers a copy of the written rejection to the seller on or before settlement date. You can lose your job, and therefore you cannot get financing, and that's legitimate. Now, if the seller believes that you purposely lost your job by doing something illegal, that's a whole different ball of wax there. But if you go out and buy a car that causes your financial picture to change and they won't lend you, then that's fraud. The seller could go after you. Okay, so like I said, make sure your buyers don't do anything once they've met with their lender. No cars, no credit cards. Do not stand at JCPenney's and say, if you buy this shirt today and get a JCPenney's card, we'll give you 50% off the shirt. You say, no, thank you. I want to pay full price for the shirt. Or not buy the shirt at all. Do not open any cards. Make sure your clients know nothing. Don't let one of those credit cards come in the mail. I mean, you have to say this stuff to your client because people don't realize it. They don't think that this makes a financial change of the picture. Chase sends you a thing and says, look, if you transfer all your debt from your American Express into this card, we're going to give you, oh, it looks great. I don't pay any interest for a year. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because you're opening up new credit. This credit hasn't closed. It's extra credit. It's out there and it affects your financial picture for the buyer. Okay? Buyer will be in default. Okay. Buyer will be in default whether or not this contingency has been removed if settlement does not occur on settlement date for any reason other than the default by seller. So something's happened. The buyer hasn't notified the seller. There's been no agreement to postpone settlement for any reason, and the seller had nothing to cause that we couldn't go to closing, then the buyer is in default. Plain and simple. If this contingency has expired or has not been removed or satisfied, any delay of the settlement date necessary to comply with the buyer's lender obligations pursuant to the TILA-RESPA integrated disclosure rule is not a default by the buyer, but seller may declare the contract void in writing. So if the contingency has expired or has not been removed through discussion between the two parties. Any delay that's caused by this act, okay, is not a default by the buyer. So if the lender causes a delay, it's not the default of the buyer. Okay, so that the seller can declare it void if they want to, but it's not, the buyer's not penalized. Okay. Okay. Nothing herein shall prohibit the parties from mutually agreeing on terms acceptable to both in writing. So all the above can be agreed upon and removed based on agreement between the two parties. Lender's written commitment shall not be delivered prior to lender's receipt of satisfactory appraisal. So no lender is going to give a written commitment until they have an appraisal in hand. Now, the appraiser may have come out to Muhammad's house yesterday, but it might be a week before the lender gets the written report. So the selling agent calling me every day, well, he was out there. Where is it? I don't have it. The lender has not received the report from the appraisal company. The lender's hands are tied. It's the appraisal and their company, and you're one of many appraisals out there, and you're on a checklist. So if someone physically goes out and they write a report up, they may make notes in the field, and every company works differently, right? So pushing it for that to arrive does you no good. All right, so appraisal provisions. VA notice of value. It is expressly agreed that notwithstanding any other provisions of this contract, buyer shall not incur any penalty by forfeit of earnest money or otherwise, or be obligated to complete the purchase of the property if this contract purchase price or cost exceeds the reasonable value of the property established by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Buyers shall, however, have the privilege and option to proceed with consummation of this contract without regard to the amount of reasonable value established by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Okay. Let's go into paragraph 2. Procedure in the event of the low appraisal. Okay. In the event that the written statement setting forth the appraisal value of the property, written statement indicates a value less than the sales price, buyer shall deliver notice to the seller stating that the buyer elects to proceed to settlement at the sales price in this contract, or requesting that the seller change the sales price to a specified lower amount of not less than the appraised value, buyer's notice, or voiding this contract based on the low appraisal. Buyer's notice shall include a copy of the written statement. In the event buyer's notice requests a price reduction, notices delivered subsequent to the delivery of buyer's notice shall be treated as follows. Within 3 days after notice delivery from one party to the other party, deliver notice accepting the terms contained in the other party's notice, or deliver notice continuing negotiations by making another offer, or deliver notice that this contract shall become void at 9 p.m. on the 3rd day following delivery, unless the recipient delivers to the other party notice of acceptance of the last delivered offer prior to the date and time, in which case this contract will remain in full force and effect. So if the appraisal comes in higher than the list price, hallelujah for the buyer, and they don't have to tell the seller anything. If it comes in lower than the list price, there is a appraisal contingency removal. We'll look at that next week. But it says, appraisal came in at or above, and we're removing the contingency and moving on, or it came in lower. Here's a copy of the appraisal. Please lower your sales price to match it. Or buyer will accept it at the lower amount and make up the difference. Now, a VA purchaser may be purchasing this property with a VA loan and may only be using 60% financing, down payment 40%, and they can afford to make up the delta. They really want the property. Someone who's in a 100% financing situation, chances are their lender is not going to let them make up the deficit. Okay, so that's the option. Again, the seller has to accept it or void the contract or negotiate. So when you're negotiating back and forwards, item 3 there, I'm sorry guys online, you're probably going to hear me say that 100 times. Item 3, deliver notice that this contract shall become void at 9 p.m. on the 3rd day following delivery. Then it says unless. So if the one party does not want to void, then they're going to accept the last offer that was out there if it meets financially with their situation. Okay? So let's stop there. We'll finish up this one, and I just noticed we're missing the other contingencies, so I'll get those printed for Monday for everybody. We need to go through the other contingencies as well. The conventional and FHA. Any questions?
This is great.
Thank you. And thank you guys for being in class. Thank you guys online for hanging in there. Appreciate it. Yep, same two that started with us. Hopefully they're awake. Have a good weekend, Adrienne and Rachel.